I'd be better if I didn't miss the new episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians last night.
I feel for you, man. That sucks.
Not again.
I just wanted to know what happened with Courtney. She's pregnant and she's a little bit on edge. Scott's opening his restaurant. It's just so fun to see all of it come together. But I guess I'll have to catch it on DVR or something.
Or I think we should give out your personal email address, and people should just start sending you email with what happened.
Start sending you spoilers about the next episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Yeah, I think that's a good recurring idea.
Fine, I just won't open them then.
This is an entirely new endeavor for us at Pocketnow.
The podcast 5 years in the making. We're all a little older. I think we probably just need a little bit more horsepower on this intro. Michael, would you be so kind? Would you lend an assist here?
It would be my pleasure, Juan.
Excellent.
A podcast 5 years in the making. We're all a little older, a few more wrinkles, a little more girth around the midsection, but the stories continue. This week, we'll be discussing LG's weak sales, Apple's 3D face, and Samsung's slow AI progress. Plus, we'll take a trip down memory lane with a group of people that have worked on this show since its inception. Make sure your phaser banks are charged and ready for episode 260 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Recorded July 6 at 1 p.m. Eastern, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphones, tablets, wearables, it's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid. And you had dreams of writing for a tech review website.
You brought a tear to my eye. Thanks for the assist there. I'll jump in and I'll take it from here. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at PocketNow.com, blasting the signal from sunny Southern California. And I'm truly honored and really excited to have a killer roster of all-star techies to chat with this week. Pocketnow editor-in-chief, Anton Denudge, former editor-in-chief Brandon Miniman, and Mr. Mobile himself, Michael Fisher, all while plucky podcast producer Jules Wong frantically plugs up the holes to keep this sinking ship afloat. Now, before we jump into tech tomfoolery, we do want to take a moment to thank this week's sponsor, HelloFresh. HelloFresh is a farm-to-box and couch-to-kitchen meal delivery service which aims to make cooking more fun, so you can focus on the whole experience, not just the finished plate you're going to share with your friends on Instagram. Each week, HelloFresh delivers delicious new recipes with step-by-step cooking instructions broken down into six easy-to-follow steps, each meal designed to take around 30 minutes to prepare, even for kitchen novices. Sourcing the freshest ingredients, measured to the exact quantities needed. This helps reduce food waste, and I actually have to throw a personal shout-out because the packaging is phenomenal. It's not just one big bucket of food. Each meal is sort of partitioned into its own individual container, and it really does take a lot of the stress off of your meal prep. Less than $10 per serving. You can select between the classic plan, vegetarian options, and a family box if you have more mouths to feed. This week on the menu is a chicken parm salad, a Juicy Lucy burger with molten cheese core, and a zesty crusted catfish served over cilantro jasmine rice. And I'm eagerly awaiting my own break here when we're done with this podcast so I can eat lunch. HelloFresh employs 2 full-time dietitians to ensure each meal is nutritionally balanced, and now offering summer fare for the seasons, all with produce sourced as close to you as they possibly can. They've just introduced breakfast options to get you started right for the most important meal of the day. Delicious ingredients you'll love to eat, simple recipes you'll love to cook. HelloFresh has a special offer for Pocketnow Weekly listeners. Get $30 off your first week of deliveries when you use the promo code PocketNow30. Again, $30 off your first week when you sign up at HelloFresh.com with the promo code PocketNow30. And we thank them for supporting the Pocketnow Weekly. Now, these momentous occasions, this podcast that we're putting together this week, these announcements tend to happen in cycles. I'm going back and listening to the very first episode of this podcast, and you guys had a very special announcement to make on episode 1 of the Pocketnow Weekly, and we have another similar announcement to make on the 5th year anniversary of the Pocketnow Weekly. Tony, would you like to jump in and let our viewers know what's going on with Pocketnow developments?
My pleasure. But first of all, I have to say, if these sponsorships, these ads wouldn't pay some bills, they're awesome. So,
I was gonna say, don't do it. Don't do it. We need to pay the bills.
so guys, we have not invented the time machine, even though I wish we would have, and I'm not really sure if I would have gone back in time or in the future. But this is a format in which I really feel at home. I have no speech. I'm just rambling because this is the format where I'm joined by not only colleagues, ex-colleagues, but also friends. And we've been doing this for quite a long time, and regardless if we are Pocketnow or Mr. Mobile or no longer in the business or new colleagues, what binds us is the friendship. Even though we're meeting probably once or twice per year in strange locations for like 5 or 10 minutes, I really feel that I'm at home here. And before I go any more sentimental on this, we have a huge announcement. We've been working like crazy for I cannot tell you how long because I lost track of time on trying to come with a solution to the audience out there which is speaking Spanish. And Spanish is a language which is spoken by 27 countries. More than 500 million people speak Spanish. And if you are one of those people who speak Spanish and you want the latest news, reviews, editorial, everything you've been accustomed to from Pocketnow, but in your language, in Espanol, now we have Pocketnow Spanish for you. You can find it at es.pocketnow.com. Go ahead. We got content already, and we're working on getting social media up to speed and everything. So if you're speaking Spanish, that's where you have to go. And
Weren't you
that's
supposed to say that in Spanish? Because the people that speak Spanish don't know what you just said.
I wish I could, but my other colleague who speaks Spanish is probably too busy
we're gonna have
polishing up the last minute changes. So back to you, Juan. Thank you very much for this.
Yeah, we're gonna have Jaime on next week on the Pocketnow Weekly to explain that better, Brandon, because unfortunately the guy with the most Spanish name in this podcast can barely order a burger and fries at a Mexican restaurant. So yes, definitely check that out, es.pocketnow.com for all of the latest tech news and reviews in Espanol. And so like I said, I can usually get through about 2 or 3 words at a time. Without further ado, let's jump into some news so we can get everyone talking on this thing. I didn't know if we would have a news stab or not. We haven't been on a live hangout for a while, and I'm hoping that I can even make it through the show because I have 3 different pieces of audio hardware just getting me audible on this without turning into robot voice. But I want to kick things off. One of the biggest controversies of this last week, the OnePlus 5 has had a number of sort of critical commentary regarding various aspects of the phone. Different reviewers have been finding different things to pick at, but I think the biggie this week has been the jelly scrolling, because, and we don't know exactly why this has been taking place, where as you're flicking through a vertical column, it seems text in pieces will start to compress and look a little wobbly. Let me start off with Brandon, because you've been in this game for a while. These types of issues seem to echo chamber and resonate in tech communities, but it's been my experience that over these last couple years, the influence for this kind of tech chatter doesn't seem to impact the consumer impression of these gadgets nearly as aggressively as it used to.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, the OnePlus 5 is such a good phone, and even in the rare cases where you have that Jello effect, it's kind of tough to pick up unless you're really looking at it. The story behind the display cable is funny, though. You guys know that the display cable for the display is in the upper right corner. And that's where all the kind of camera sensors live. If you kind of turn over the phone, that's where they are in the upper left corner of the phone. And so they couldn't put the display cable up there anymore because they have the dual camera sensors. So they flipped it upside down, and in the kernel, they have the display inverted with software, which in most cases is perfectly fine. And it really doesn't take that much processing for the phone to do, and thus there's no impact. But in some cases, it causes this Jello effect. But from the people that I've talked to that have this phone, none of them have the effect. What about you guys?
No, I didn't have it on my review device. I didn't know what people were talking about.
I can simulate it. I can and again, it seems to be most it's not as pervasive UI. it seems to be certain apps time or scroll depending on some piece of code, which is affected by this, potentially affected. I mean, this is all still speculation, right? We don't know exactly what might be causing this on certain review units, but we're pointing more towards the one change that is affecting the OnePlus 5 being this screen inversion, where we had to fit this cabling, we had to flip the display upside down. Michael, when we look at the perception of a brand, like the perception of a company like OnePlus, they're trying to sell this, we're this tiny little upstart, we're fighting the big players.
Right.
Is this a bigger deal than, say, benchmark rigging? In our communities with our fan base, we're always looking for something to criticize. We're always looking for something to attack, it seems. And it seems like OnePlus has kind of a couple points where our respective audiences are sort of, pulling out the pitchforks and the torches.
Yeah, and the OnePlus audience is certainly, the target consumer for a OnePlus device is certainly going to be more fastidious about trying to figure out whether there is anything wrong with the device at all. I don't know. The benchmark rigging is a totally separate thing. I think that's, that's a whole other ball of wax. But whether it's that or the jelly scroll effect, which, by the way, their response to it, I think, is all kinds of wrong, which is that it's intended behavior or something like that. I think people, if they want a OnePlus 5, are going to buy one and take their chances. And if it has the problem, then it has the problem, and maybe it'll get sorted out, because it's still a pretty good value. But I don't know. It's like, I didn't have the problem because I haven't encountered the problem firsthand. It's not something that is on my mind all the time. We have to remember that Samsung came back from phones that literally caught on fire, right? And when, they're not doing terribly worse for wear, despite missing part of a cycle for it. So I'm not concerned about OnePlus's reputation in the long run, especially considering, what is it? It's 4 years that they've been around, and the messaging has not, despite all of us talking about it all the time, it's not yet been widely accepted that this whole, we're a feisty upstart and we're going to make some mistakes, is really not at all accurate, because anytime that they're in trouble, they can just go across the street to their corporate parent and get a bag of money and keep on going. You know what I mean?
Well, and Tony, I mean, to Michael's point, I mean, they don't even have to go across the street. I mean, their offices are in the same building.
Sorry.
I think I am the least qualified in talking about the OnePlus 5 because I haven't touched the phone yet. But I think I can talk to what I feel if I take a step back and how I perceive the market nowadays. I see a shift in paradigm. I don't see companies pushing the envelope like they did a couple of years back. I think now the entire business is about cutting corners, is about trying to keep the price as low as possible, opposed to, if you're trying to push the envelope, your price goes so high that probably people won't afford to buy your phone. So in walking that very thin line between keeping the costs down, keeping the phone thin, keeping the specs as high as possible,
Right.
It is, I think, acceptable to make some air quotes mistakes or design decisions, which in the end help your product. And if that particular flaw is not a deal breaker, I think that we are just picking on a company or on a product just because we have to do it as media in order for our audiences to be as well informed as possible.
Well, yeah, and I think still. Oh, go ahead, Brandon, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that the biggest perception issue with the OnePlus 5 is this expectation they created around the camera. I mean, when you take the box out, it says on both sides, dual camera, clearer photos.
Yep.
And in my experience, OnePlus 5 camera is like the most hit and miss camera I've ever used. Like literally 50% of the shots I try to take come out terribly. And so, when you kind of play up the phone aspect or the camera aspect of a phone, and then that does not deliver, I think that does more damage than a scrolling issue that most people aren't even seeing.
Well, and especially because I thought that was also going to be something really important to talk about, was this perception of the company. They're making, I think, an obvious homage to another smartphone manufacturer in some of the options that they're choosing.
You got to be thinking about Oppo.
Yes, of course. As our audience is very well aware of my recent comparisons between the OnePlus 5 and some other manufacturer. But yeah, no, I agree. I think this is what's going to be curious to me, because I think people who've been following this major company look at a brand like Oppo, which I think tried to compete by pushing the envelope and really trying to deliver some techie enthusiast fun features, and then made a significant pivot towards a more mass market approach. And I wonder if maybe this might be a transition point for OnePlus. I don't know. Can a brand like this survive only courting enthusiasts and trying to win a price war that can't really be won? Is it time for them to kind of pack that in and start looking at other ways that they can kind of keep margins higher and appeal to a more broad consumer base,
while making the price increasingly higher? So
yeah, while making the price. Well, that's the problem, right? If you keep playing at like the tiniest of margins, then your company can't really make money off the same group of consumers.
And I think in that way, OnePlus was quite smart to come into the game with a $299 smartphone when most of its contemporaries were selling for like twice the price, because they had a lot of room above that price tier to expand upward. And yeah, every year it's been sort of mentioned that like, yeah, the new OnePlus is great, but it's more expensive. So, but it's still a great deal. They still have another generation where they can do that again. And before, I was just recently finishing up my review of the Moto Z2 Play, and it's unlocked. It's going to be $499, and at that price point, it's like, well, this is debatable, but the OnePlus 5 is very much in the conversation at that price point. So, they're playing the game right, and I think they have another year's worth of room to play there.
That is very true. Well, and also I just think the increased competition around that sub $500 price has just gotten so brutal that it doesn't carry the same novelty. But I want to switch gears here, moving from a company which is sort of, flattering Apple design to a company that is Apple. One of the worst transitions I've ever pulled off in the history of me hosting this podcast. So we've been getting various reports. Again, a little bit of the controversy of what might be surrounding this company this year. We might be looking at Apple dropping the fingerprint sensor on this next generation of iPhone. It looks like Apple is running into some of the same issues that Samsung faced with the Galaxy S8, and they are maybe going to opt for an only face unlock. I want to start off with you, Tony, in looking at security and looking at how we produce consumer-friendly products. Will this be too significant of a change? We're not only getting rid of the home button, but then also this fingerprint security that Apple helped popularize, that really made people comfortable about using their phone for things other than just email.
If I would have to predict, again, as objectively as possible, I would say that will or might not happen in the near future, because Apple has been pushing the fingerprint scanner Touch ID so hard since 3 or 4 years when it was first introduced. You've got fingerprint scanner for security reasons on your phone. You've got it implemented with iOS 11 in its beta. It's been interconnected with the App Store, with Apple Pay, with your Macs, with your Apple Watch. So I don't think that they will get rid of it. The button, maybe they can find a solution in trying to keep the Touch ID somewhere on the back or behind the screen, but I think that the face scanner, or whatever its name will be, will come to complement Touch ID, which has been proven to work very well for Apple. It's fast, it's reliable, and a lot of people are invested in it.
Yeah, like so many other things about Apple, it wasn't the first to use this kind of tech, but they kind of set a standard for it. Brandon, can they succeed with so many changes? This is probably the most aggressive refresh of the iPhone line we've ever seen. The iPhone has been very consistently evolving since the original, and now it looks like they've saved up a number of tech changes all for one phone. We're always a little wary of a first-gen product. Does this feel like Apple is going to bite off more than they can chew?
I feel like they've been working on this for so long, and I feel like so many people have been waiting for this for so long. I mean, I'm thinking about my mother and my father and like my aunt and uncle and my brother and my sister. they're all waiting for a big iPhone upgrade. They want something that gives them that same feeling they had years ago when they took out the 5S or the 5 for the first time, or the 4 for the first time. Phones that actually looked different. So there's a lot of pent-up demand for something dramatic, and I think it'll be very successful. And Tony, you were talking about how Apple's invested so much in the fingerprint sensor, and I agree. And if you think about the authentication methods, what's the right word for that? Where you
got it.
No, I was going to say authentication. That's
authentic. You guys are like a dictionary. If you look at all the authentication methods, face unlock, iris scanning, fingerprint scanning, toe scanning, whatever else there is, the most convenient by far is fingerprint scanning, because you don't have to look at your phone. You could be in any circumstance. It could be in your pocket while you do it. You could be paying for something. Face unlock, if it's the only authentication method, is so inconvenient. I can't imagine Apple putting all of their weight behind something. Imagine checking out at a store and you have to sit there and go like that. Even if it's really fast, it's not like a fingerprint. So I can't see them leaving the fingerprint.
Before we head back to Michael, or we head to Michael, just one note on what you said. I have the complete opposite experience with my friends and family and everybody who's using an iPhone. For the life in them, they wouldn't want the iPhone to change because they're so used to it. Nobody would ever consider using an Android, even though I've got examples from my personal inner circle. The Galaxy S8 looks a lot better than the iPhone. But they just wouldn't switch because they're so used to those icons being there. They're so used to those buttons being there. They're so used to that phone doing what they know how to make that phone to do, that they just are, hesitant to accept the change, if that makes sense.
Well, and actually, that's the question I wanted to throw to Michael is we have an established understanding of how an iPhone works. I mean, even for adding things like a force pressing into the screen, if you were to take someone with an original iPhone and give them an iPhone 7 Plus, there wouldn't be much relearning for them to navigate that phone. With these potential changes coming down for the iPhone 8, will Apple be able to move the needle on some of these new technologies?
I think yes, but I think only if they're able to introduce it in a supplementary way. I agree with Tony and Brandon both. I mean, it seems highly improbable to me that Apple would ditch the fingerprint scanner entirely because of what Tony's talking about. Like, people are used to this paradigm. And what Brandon's talking about, it's a much more convenient way to unlock your phone than Face Unlock, even when Face Unlock works very swiftly, as it has on the S8 in most conditions. Yeah, I mean, so I think that 3D Touch is a good example one, because I don't think a lot of people use it still to this day, but Apple continues to hone it. And
right.
We're going to probably see some more developments there. I think it has to be
They don't even know about 3D Touch.
Yeah,
most
right.
people don't
Most
know it
people are
exists.
just like, oh, why is it doing that? I just tried to long press.
Yeah.
So
well, that's been my biggest problem is when you look at a tech like 3D Touch, there's a problem of conveyance.
Yes.
Right? There's very little to alert the user that there is an additional function on this icon if you force press it versus just sort of a standard long press. But when a major marketing point on something like 3D Face Unlock is put through the juggernaut of Apple marketing, I feel like there's the potential here for them to do better with this than what Samsung was able to do to raise awareness on something like iris scanning.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. But I still think, though, that there's, what did you say before? I mean, Apple's main strategy is to take an existing technology and implement it better, right? And I think it would be uncharacteristically bold and rather risky of Apple to discontinue the fingerprint scanner on a device with this new authentication technology. I would be very surprised.
I agree there. I worry that with so many different changes, the change in the display, the change in not having sort of that circle home button location down at the bottom, that they do stand to alienate a few customers. Like I look at my grandmother and her iPad, and she understands how everything in the Apple ecosystem works based on this home button. So I definitely share some concerns. Now, a company that has been very conservative in tech updates, switching gears to a company that's very aggressive in tech updates. We have some noise, some rumors or some discussion that Samsung might also be trying to join the AI speaker game. positioning Bixby for a different kind of usage or audience. But at the same time, that development on Bixby communicating with Westerners who speak English, that voice translation is taking its time. Michael, you're already rubbing your temples. I feel like you have something to say on this matter.
Man, I mean, like, I remember sitting there, and when Samsung was talking about the S8, the Bixby at the S8 announcement, and they literally said it's going to replace everything that you need to touch your phone for. You'll be able to use your voice for. And I remember sitting there being like, this is a massive overpromise, and they cannot help but underdeliver on this. But the degree to which Samsung has underdelivered with Bixby in the West is rather staggering. And I think if the S8 were not such a great phone in every other respect, almost, they'd be getting a lot more heat for it, because they certainly deserve it. And now they're gonna expand the product line with more hardware, running software that cannot help but be ill-suited to the purpose, because it doesn't have a lot of data, because it doesn't work that well, because it's not in many markets, because and a lot of people are not using it. It's just this massive cycle of degenerative nonsense. No, I wish this wouldn't come out.
Well, and Brandon, it's been my hypothesis that I don't feel like any company's really nailed the Star Trek style voice butler assistant or anything like that. So I feel there's still room for a player to come in and really shake things up. But I kind of feel like Samsung, on a number of their first party in-house solutions, that they're more often likely to reinvent the wheel as opposed to really push the boundaries on what this tech can do.
Yeah, I mean, they have to follow everyone that's gone before them, because, like Michael said, they don't have access to the data. I am so excited about, it's so funny, because if you were to go back in time, the 90s, and you would say, like, what's the new tech thing coming out? No one could predict the internet would take over like it did. And then if you went to like the year 2000, no one could predict that the phone would be as pervasive as it is. And then if you went to like 2010, no one could predict this idea of ambient computing, and how, like, you don't need to stare at a screen all the time to perform so many computing tasks. And so I've got an Amazon Echo in almost every room, and and they're listening to every word I say. And I'm really to that Echo thing. Like, I kind of wish I could get a Google Assistant, but I just couldn't justify it, and my wife would yell at me. And then to have a HomePod plus a Bixby speaker, plus Microsoft still hasn't come out with their thing yet. I mean, they're coming out with a tremendous competitor to all this.
Or is their competitor the Xbox? Like, is that their living room assault on this type of product? We have basically, it's hilarious. So we have a PlayStation 4 because my wife did not want to connect listening to everything in the living room. And now we're surrounded by always on microphones, right? That's just sort of like from our phones, tablets, everything like that. Actually, let me shift that over to Tony. Who do you think could potentially shake up this market right now? It seems like the current fight is between Alexa and Google Assistant. My feelings, like, I would love to see IBM deliver a consumer-facing solution for Watson. Like a company that could really push the boundaries on what we can do with voice control, but it seems really unlikely that they're interested in that part of the market.
Juan, my friend, you've managed to find the only person in the room who has never used any of these, because they're not available in my region. So on a theoretical, no, Google Home is not available here. Amazon Alexa is not available here. Nothing is available here, and not even the Apple whatever HomePod will not be available here. I do have an Xbox One, though.
Have a Western first world problem that we're complaining about Bixby not being translated for us right now.
No, but I think at the theoretical level, there's no way for a company to win under the current circumstances, because all of these products basically do everything that the other product is doing. So if I were to pick a winner, I would say that the winner company will be the company who will make things either differently or will make new things. And I don't know what that new thing could be, because you can order a cab, order a pizza, go to the movies, shop online. You can basically talk to a personal home assistant like you would be talking to a normal person. So I think that since they all do the same, it will come down to the cost and who does it a little bit better, because I don't see these products doing anything new or anything that they don't already do.
Well, and I feel like there are so many of these baby steps. I think smartwatches were a perfect example of a tech that wasn't going to ever be super long lived, kind of like Bluetooth headsets back in the day. You know, everyone had a Bluetooth. Now, very few people. I mean, you see more cabled headphones in my neck of the woods, which is really disconcerting when you see people driving with their headphones in Southern California. But we keep getting these little glimpses. Tony holds up his Plantronics. Yep, I had one of those too, and I forget what they were called, like the Flamingo or something like that. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But we keep getting these little glimpses, you know, Google totally flopping with Google Glass. Rumors of Apple pushing back some kind of heads-up display till potentially 2019, if it's ever delivered. And yet we kind of keep all then circling on something that shows some minor consumer success in the short term, and then that tech burns itself out. Smartwatches make a little bit of a blip. The Apple Watch comes out, sales spike, and now they're kind of done. Do we think that that's maybe where the opportunity lies? The company that's willing to take a bigger risk on being first, potentially losing the market to other companies that follow, but then we actually do get something truly new, or are we kind of done? Is this where we're going to stay for a while?
It's not enough for it to be new. It also has to be useful. Because you can come up with a lot of features like Bixby on the Galaxy S8. If it doesn't work, it's not useful for me, I'm not going to use it, even if it would be available. So let's say if Amazon or Google or Apple or Microsoft or you name it will probably come up with something who would, I don't know, rub your feet. If it's not useful for me, it'll not be a winning product.
Yeah.
Look, Brandon. Oh, sorry. Real quick. I want to throw this one to Brandon because I kind of cut him off before he was finishing up his point there. But Brandon, do you think that this is maybe evidence that we're quickly approaching the post-smartphone world, like we now currently live in the post-desktop and laptop world? We're trying to find these other market segments that expand on data and services beyond just the glowing rectangle that fits in our pocket.
Can I make a little bit of a prediction of where this is all going?
Yes, please. And I'm going to put money on it. Hold on.
Okay.
I got to call my bookie.
So this might not come out right, but okay. So, and this probably only makes sense if you actually use these products in your life, these ambient computing devices. So the first stage of these ambient computing devices is the say. It's the audio response. You ask it a question, it answers. Or you ask it to do something digital, right? So it can play a song, or it can unlock your front door if you have it connected, or turn on your lights or whatever. The next step of that is what we're seeing now with the Echo Show, where it can actually show you things. So you could say like, you know, show me the front door camera, or like, show me all the different variations of the color red, or whatever like that. What comes after that? This is a question that I think I have the answer to, but and Tony, you kind of hinted at it. What is like the ultimate manifestation of ambient computing? After it can say things to you and show you things, then it can
do things for you.
Do things for you, and that will manifest itself in a robotic form. And I really believe that the way that this is going is that. Imagine Amazon in the future open sourcing their Alexa platform so that you could create a robot that would interface with all of their ability to understand language and to show you things. So developers could make a robot that could make your bed, or could, as you said, Tony, rub your feet, or could do the dishes. It's not that hard to have a robot do the dishes. In fact, you know, you guys might remember
your own personal butler.
Yes, exactly. And like if you have the physical manifestation of Alexa, and it can hear you, and it can move its limbs, and it can act like a human being, then it can do things for you. And I think in not too far into the future, it might start with very limited use case robots, but in the future, we'll have these programmable robots where developers can add skills to it, like real skills to make your bed, or take out your trash, or do whatever you want.
You guys ever watch the show Humans on AMC?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I knew you would have a good media reference for us, Michael.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Wow.
I knew you wouldn't let me down there. So is this kind of where we're arriving, Michael? Is this the confluence of expanding on services and data, better interoperability. I think what's kind of funny is watching Google come full circle around to where the original iPhone was with web apps. Now we have these sort of persistent web plugins that developers can kind of put into web browsers for us instead of downloading the full app. Is the next step literally taking these things out of our hands as, you know, walking meat bags and handing them over to robots and butlers and androids? Or basically, I want to know, in my lifetime, will I have a Commander Data that can do all my chores for me?
Well, if you do, I certainly hope you don't go the Bruce Maddox route and try to strip him of his rights. Well, you know, I think it's important to understand that he won't be yours. No,
Right.
Brandon paints quite an interesting picture of our imminent robot future. I really hadn't thought about that, but I can't see any other way that it would develop, and that is immensely exciting to me.
I just hope I get to see it in my lifetime. We'll have to create a whole other podcast to talk about the ethical concerns of having artificially intelligent, potentially self-aware systems that are basically our slaves.
We'll see if Philippa Lavoie is still practicing law. We'll do the whole thing. It'll be great.
I want to switch gears to something that I actually find to be this was actually sort of a disappointing news story for me. This year, I feel a number of smartphone companies are finding some really great traction in revamping their product lines, fresh new takes on design, on aesthetics, without necessarily walking away from sort of the core techie audience. And we've got some sales numbers here now for phones like the LG G6. The iPhone found a little bit more of a resurgence, the iPhone 7. Galaxy S8 is selling well, though Samsung's numbers are still lower because of the Note 7. But it was the LG G6 that really did disappoint me, that it seemed like it was just too early, that consumers played the waiting game. The Galaxy S8 was right around the corner. LG didn't make enough of being first for 2017 in many markets, and that seems to be affecting their overall sales, that they're sort of underproducing right now. Tony, I mean, especially because I finally think I found a phone that you can talk about because you have spent some time with it. What are your thoughts? Did consumers miss out on an underrated phone, or were they right to hold off and look at other options?
I think that there are two mistakes, and both are mistakes that LG did. The first mistake is it's not about who's first or who's second, because if it was about that, HTC would be the top of the charts because they're always the last to launch something with the U11.
Right.
No, I think that the first mistake LG did was not invest enough dollars in marketing the LG G6, which is a great phone. Now, I'm not sure about the US, but here in my region, the most ads I see are about the Galaxy S8, and second comes the Huawei P10. The second biggest mistake, or the second mistake I think that made people hold off on the G6, is, again, that particular fragmentation Juan you talked about in one of your videos, where the Korean LG G6 with the 64 gig storage, with the wireless charging, with the Wi-Fi DAC is available in Korea, and it's not available in Europe or in the US. So if I'm in Europe or in the US, of course I'm not going to buy something which is so much lower than its own sibling, not to mention the competition. So I think these two combined led to a story which doesn't surprise me at all. LG's got a great phone, but I think that they failed at giving it its full potential.
Well, and Michael, you and I both recently went back to putting our personal SIMs into LG G6s for a period of time. I don't know if you're still using the G6.
Oh, yeah.
I took mine for a zoo trip, and it was actually the perfect camera phone for chasing around a toddler.
Sure.
I got this amazing, like her meeting a baby chimpanzee between the glass. And it was this photo burst that I don't know I could have pulled off with another phone. Like right time, right place. Camera app actually fired up quickly for the first time I've ever needed it to. So what are your thoughts? Just like, you know, kind of coming back, revisiting it. We've gotten over the initial sort of honeymoon period of S8s and U11s. Does this still have a place in the conversation, or did LG stumble too much in diversifying the G6 and under advertising it?
I feel like I've been asked a lot about the G6 on Twitter from people who know to ask about the G6 because they're phone geeks, right? And a lot of those questions are in the context of should I buy the OnePlus 5 or the G6? Because that seems to be the question a lot of phone geeks are asking themselves. By contrast, I was just at a 4th of July barbecue where I was asked by a couple of normal people what phone to get next, and the G6 entered the conversation with those people who I knew were interested in photography. They had never heard of it.
Yeah.
And it took me showing them some of my Instagram feed because I think, unlike you, Juan, I've actually always kept it since its release. It's always been in my second pocket because I can't get away from that wide angle camera. I think it's just, oh my God, for an untrained photographer such as myself, I mean, that's the shortcut to making a dramatic, awesome looking photo that makes it look like you know what you're doing. You know, it's like this.
Yeah, totally. It's really cool.
So it deserves a place in the conversation, I think, is the way I would put it. You couple that with, I mean, listen, it's not as sexy as the S8. It's, you know, the hardware sort of looks like a reference design a little bit, but it's rugged. it's more rugged than the S8 is. The software, you know, a custom launcher fixes a lot of the software problems, and it's got, in my market, it's got wireless charging. You know, it's got some stuff going for it, and it's freaking cheap now at $500 on T-Mobile. So it deserves to be in the conversation without advertising. It has as much chance as any other phone that doesn't get advertised. You know, it'll disappear, and LG will move on to the next thing, and unless they advertise that, that'll disappear too. It's very frustrating because I really
think
quite
you
like
nailed it with what you said, that it has as much chance as any other phone without advertising. And I think that this is where we, the media or the consumers, somehow had too big of an expectation for this phone.
Mm-hmm. Well, because we wanted. I'm sorry, Juan.
No, please.
We wanted to be caught up in this. You know what the resurrection not the resurrection story, the redemption story. Different things. We were I think, or speaking personally, I was caught up in this redemption story of a company that made an okay phone last year that was just, it sold so poorly that it damaged the company in a lot of ways. To see them come back and really make something quite compelling on a lot of levels was encouraging. But
if you remember, we've been wishing for LG to find its place since the G Flex.
Of course.
Oh yeah. Well, and Brandon, I kind of feel like LG's strategy places way too much pressure on those of us who talk about gadgets online to pick up a huge part of the education for consumers. Again, at the top of the show, we were talking about like we don't have quite the same influence over the market as we once did. Whereas you take a look at a company like Samsung, and not only are they plastering advertising everywhere, they're also bringing YouTube reviews to television commercials, where LG can't even get a carrier deal that will feature their phone for a 15-second spot that no one's going to watch anyway. Do you think that there's a way for them to recover in this market when the problem doesn't seem to be the quality of the phone? It seems to be a problem of education.
Yeah, it's a problem of education. And we used to talk about how, you know, HTC would have, they had some bad years, but they had some good years too. Some really good years. Like the original M7 with the speakers of any phone ever. M7. Or maybe back then in the day it was. And like they just didn't advertise it at all. And I think a big problem that LG has is that they've decided that they are going to be the first to release a phone in the beginning of the year. You know, after the lull of the holidays, all the phones are out in January, February, and then the springtime comes, and there's LG with their phone, and it's really cool for like a month or two. And especially this year because it ushered in the first wave of these bezel-less phones that we're seeing this year, or bezel-less, smaller bezel phones. But like right away, you get the S8, boom, and then you get the new HTC, boom, and then the OnePlus 5, boom, and then right around the corner is the Note 8, and it's just like, it's over. It's over before it began. 1 or 2 months of exclusive newness is just not enough, especially if you're not going to advertise it.
Do you think it would have stood a chance, or things would have played out differently if, say, LG G6 came after the S8? I think they would be even lower.
I think it would.
I think they'd be even lower.
Yeah, I think history teaches us that makes no difference because the G3 and G4 launched in that window, and they didn't. I mean, they may have done better comparatively, but they didn't do very well.
Yeah, I think the G4 was probably the closest LG has been to really executing a phone launch well and working with a couple carriers just to show the phone that it existed to other consumers. And they had a talking point about leather backs. And I had questions from family and friends like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's something unique. In the same way that Motorola's Moto Maker. There was a little spark of interest, but then pretty much everyone went back to iPhones and Galaxies.
As always.
As always. But again, I feel like without the pervasive awareness at the consumer level, your brand cannot transition into being a lifestyle element. Like an iPhone is something you leave the house with your wallet and keys. Like it's that important.
It's a fashion accessory.
Discussion. And it helps inform what your style is. And I think LG finally delivered a phone that could complement someone's style if that's the right fit for you. The G6 is a stunning phone. But no one knows about it, so no one's going to buy it. I want to blitz through. We've got 3 more quick talking points, which I just thought were kind of funny that these are companies popping back up in the news since we were, we're talking about like looking back at, sort of Pocketnow Classic. We got a confirmation. It was in my Twitter feed this morning that Zeiss is confirmed to be working with HMD for new Nokia flagships. Do you think we're going to get another super 41 megapixel shooter, or is this all going to be smaller dual cameras and zooms and stuff like that?
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes, you can.
Zeiss, so you're the expert here, right? Zeiss only did the lens technology, right? They didn't do anything with regard to the sensor or the OIS or any of that stuff?
They tweaked the sensor. I had an interview, I think it was the 2014 or 2013 MWC. It was, I think, back in the day of the PureView 1, the initial PureView. And they had, at the Nokia booth back then, they had people from Zeiss actually talking about the technology. And I specifically asked them whether it's only about the lens, and the story is pretty much the same as it is with Huawei and Leica. They are also invested in fine-tuning that particular algorithm of outputting the final product, the picture. So it's not just the lens, it's not the sensor in its entirety, but it's the processing of the image.
That's exciting to me. I think my only piece of maybe worthwhile input is that we will have to wait and see what the results are from this, whatever this mystery device will be, or family of devices, because as we know, as we saw from the Hasselblad Moto Z collaboration,
Yeah,
a name does not make a great picture.
Yeah, I was really sad that Hasselblad had their name on that.
Me too.
As we learned in 2016, software is the future of cameras. You can take a phone without OIS, and the results are just unbelievably spectacular. And maybe only the best tech companies in the world can do this.
You're talking about the
for
Pixel?
now, but
well, until you shoot video with the Pixel in low light, and then you get those shaky, long shutter speed, jaggy, blurry shots. But other than that, they're almost right on top of it. Halo ring flash, the terrible lens flare. So I just want to briefly hit on this one because I think this is hilarious and we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. But just
I'm not even going to comment on this one.
Sailfish OS is currently in development on the Sony Xperia X, and the headline for that, I could not be less excited about anything happening with the Xperia X, and I couldn't be even less excited about anything happening with Sailfish OS. Is this any way for a company to apologize for that terrible crowdfunding tablet debacle?
Not even that. Not even that, because correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but you and I were among the biggest fans and advocates for Yola since its announcement.
Do you still have your Yola t-shirt?
I still do. I still have both of them.
Yeah.
So I think that this is just a textbook example on how to screw things up.
You know, and to be fair to Yola, I think the deck was stacked against Sailfish to begin with. It was too late for a new platform at that point. Even when BlackBerry launched after that, it was too late for that. You know, they came into the game too late. They had some great ideas. I would love to use this. I have no reason to use this, and it's a shame. I miss new platforms and new exciting platforms, but.
And it looks to me that you are speaking about Yola, but while you were talking about Yola, my mind just ran off and I thought about Nextbit.
Oh.
Yeah.
But they succeeded. They Silicon Valley succeeded because they got acquired, right? Yola,
Yeah.
So kind of true.
So, investors are happy because at least money exchanged hands. Lastly, let me just wrap this one up. We've got a Meizu Pro 7 which is reviving an idea of having a rear display, a tiny little display that sits below the camera module. Again, I thought this one was quirky fun to bring up with you guys because for the years that we've been covering technology, we flirted with these gimmicky hardware concepts. Again, the second phone display. Is it the ticker display at the top of a V20? Is it the ticker display at the bottom of, I forget what Samsung it was that had that? Do you need something on the back of your phone? Someone was criticizing my OnePlus 5 coverage because, I don't ever look at the back of my own phone, so I don't care if it looks like an iPhone. And you're like, okay, fair play. That's actually a really well argued counterpoint.
Unless you have a Yotaphone.
Yeah. But now we've got this Pro 7, and it's got like this tiny little LED or LCD display under these cameras. Is this what smartphone fans have been missing that they didn't even know they needed?
No.
Good.
But I have to imagine that I haven't used the Yotaphone, but I have to. There's so many situations where like you want to put a list on your phone. You don't want to have to power on the display, and just to have it very readable form. Or just be nice to have the back of the phone be used for something. I mean,
I agree. No, and Yotaphone does it elegantly, I think, in that it uses e-ink, which is a different display technology optimized for different use cases. We could go on about that for a long time. This seems to me to be something fun, and I'm glad manufacturers are still playing with alternate concepts. But I don't think this is bound to catch on anytime soon.
I was looking at the pictures of the phone, and the actual display is just a small part of the phone's back. It looks like you're placing a very small phone on the back of a bigger phone, and it's offset to the left. And it even from a design perspective, I don't think it has any chance of standing tall in this market.
The only thing that could be kind of nice about having an active display back there is how much I hate trying to review selfie cameras, the front-facing cameras on phones, because I think they're all at best maybe adequate, but usually terrible. I've gotten really good at the rear camera blind selfie, just holding up a phone and kind of clicking a few shots. We had Philippe Kahn, the inventor of the smartphone, not the smartphone, of the phone, the camera phone. And from those early days, we used to put mirrors on the back of a phone. And then I reviewed the U11, and the U11 is the easiest time I've ever had in taking a rear camera blind selfie. It could be kind of nice.
I reviewed the Chrome mirror-backed Z5 Premium from Sony, and that is the ultimate selfie phone with the back camera.
Oh yeah. What about
the
the ZXZ Premium? Is that what that is?
It's pretty, and this is the black one. It's very reflective. So yeah, a lot of phones are like unintentionally doing that, I guess.
Well, Juan, if you wouldn't crap all over smartwatches all the time, you could use your smartwatch as a viewfinder. And
but then
crash all the time, and it would be great.
But the thing that because I love smartwatches, but that's one of my least favorite uses is because then it goes over Bluetooth and I have to use a custom camera app.
It's total garbage. No, it's
just so bad. Where like, for people that like got really good at shooting with GoPros, right? Someone who's like really good at vlogging on a GoPro, you just sort of get a feel for where's the camera sensor, right about there.
Yep.
Good enough.
A GoPro shoots everything. I mean, you can't not be in the frame.
With a GoPro. You could be behind it.
Well, fair enough. I maybe also am again sort of a little spoiled by that LG G6 wide camera. We're gonna shift gears here. I have a couple tweets that Jules has been sending in using the pnweekly hashtag on Twitter. Let me scroll down, just kind of circling back to that LG conversation from Ben Cherian90. Is it a good idea to keep the V20 around for another year? Do you think that last year's tank of an LG can still compete towards the end of this calendar year?
That's a good question. I didn't play with the V20, so I will recuse myself from commentary.
I saw nodding from Tony. You seem to think like it can still hold up.
Yes, I would definitely think that the V20 is still a phone to keep and to use until fall 2018 when the V40 is going to come out, unless they kill the V lineup altogether, because not only it's a tank and it's indestructible, don't drop it, you're going to break some tiles, but it's really what the G5 should have been. And yeah, belongs to TLDR. I think the V20 is still a phone to consider if you can afford it and if you like big phones.
Brandon, any thoughts?
Did not use it, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
You're a fanboy, Juan.
No, I'm a big fanboy. So the V20 and the Mate 9 are the two phones that I think have found the most rotation, which is shocking for me because I hate phablets. And the two biggest phones of last year are the phones that I keep coming back to. But for me, I think 2016 phones are aging so much better than 2015 phones were. That if you're rocking a Qualcomm 820, I don't see a lot of software on the horizon that's really going to tax that phone and make it unusable. I don't see many companies really trying to push the boundaries on things like AR or VR or anything like that that's going to make you feel like that phone can't hang. So really, it's just going to come down to software support. We know LG is a little lame there, but the hardware is so good that it kind of makes up for some of those issues. We have a comment here from @official_AWS. If Apple takes away Touch ID, I don't think people will buy the new iPhone. They've got it in the MacBook. They can't drop it now. I think the new iPhone is going to sell like crazy just because it's so fresh. I don't think it'll matter. I mean, like, I think Apple could take away Touch ID and the phone is still going to set records for sales, but then people will grumble after the fact and then just sort of get used to how they use their phone. I don't think that one feature is really going to impact sales.
But adding to what you just said, I think it's not comparable to when Apple just simply decided to ditch the 3.5mm headphone jack, because in that particular case, there was not an ecosystem built upon it, and there was not, the bang wasn't so big. Now, in terms of the Touch ID, aside from the fact that the Macs have it and basically everything security related which matters on the ecosystem, in the ecosystem, is based on it, a lot of developers will be also affected by such a decision. And I don't think Apple will shoot themselves in the foot, because yes, they might sell the same number of iPhone 8s or whatever its name will be, but in terms of revenue from other sources, from the App Store, from everything else will drop, and I don't think that's going to be a smart business decision.
Yeah, we know Apple's big growth recently has been in moving services over, that they're showing consistent growth on Apple Music and payment transactions. That's got to be a growing business for them too.
Especially now that with iOS 11, you'll be able to just send money through the Messages application with just a touch of the Touch ID.
Again, like, man, I'm shocked that that's a big deal, but then I realized, like, oh no, iPhone users really haven't been playing with stuff like that natively on iOS. I just want to wrap this up. This is one for everybody here from @FatProduce, #pnweekly. What devices are you looking forward to the most this year? So wrapping up 2017, what's striking your fancy? What phones are you most looking forward to?
Let me start first, because it's going to be a short answer for me.
I was actually going to start off with Tony. Excellent.
Yes, the iPhone 8 is exciting. The Note 8 is exciting. The S8 is an exceptional device. They're all exciting to use, to own, to wait for their launch. But fast forward, today would be December 31st. I think I am personally the most excited about the BlackBerry Key 1. I think that phone just made my year.
Wow.
I've been using it for like a month or so, and I just can't go anywhere without it.
Why?
Mine's over on the side. I can't reach it. I love it.
Why? Because it brings back memories from that muscle memory that just when I started off this podcast, it feels like coming home. I was in my early years of being a sales manager for a corporation which equipped us with BlackBerries. For me, it's getting back there. And in the particular case of the Key 1, I know I can go away for the weekend without taking my charger with me, because that thing is solid for me for 3 days.
Totally.
And the keyboard, I just
Brandon,
love it.
I feel we should go to you next, because it didn't seem like you were loving the Key 1 and WTF. Why the face?
No. Well, so the phone I'm most looking forward to is the new iPhone, and for one reason, mainly, and that's, have you guys played with the 120 hertz refresh rate on the new iPad Pros?
Yeah.
I
have not.
It's It's
I
something.
forget, you have crazy mutant eyeballs that can see those things.
No. It's nothing to do with eyeballs. It has to do with responsiveness. And do you guys remember when we went from 30 hertz to 60 hertz in, iPhone's been 60 hertz for a very long time, but Android before Project Butter was not 60 hertz. And
Right.
it dramatically changed the way that you use your phone because everything was so fluid and smooth. And to go to 120 hertz, I don't think there's any returns after that. But I think when we see 120 hertz on the new iPhone, Android's going to be coming out, maybe the next version of Android, because it's got to come from the operating system, presumably.
I think we're in for a software. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's going to be awesome. And that's going to make our devices feel like they're just going to be so smooth. It's going to be crazy.
But will it
We're going to finally
life? Will it improve your life?
Yes, it will. You don't know, Tony, because
what
you
kind
can't
of
see
question
it
is
yet.
that?
All right, Michael, what phone are you? Because I think you're joining me and Tony on our appreciation for the Key One this year. What phone are you looking forward to? What do you see coming down the pipe that's really going to strike your fancy?
It's a question I hadn't actually considered this year, which is crazy because it's late in the year. But I'm always excited to see what the next Note is going to be. But I have to say that the V30 holds a high place up there this year. I've never liked the V line, frankly. I thought the V10 was an ugly monstrosity, and the V20 was sort of dull, which was a greater sin. I'm talking about aesthetically. But having used the G6 for long enough now to see what LG can do in terms of the camera, particularly with the wide-angle camera, I would be very excited to see what an improved version of that optics package looks like.
And Michael, you've used the Priv and you've used the Dell Venue Pro, the slider phones. Would you get back to sliding up just to unveil a secondary screen?
Oh, I totally would. I wish that V30
I would slide the heck out of it.
I would break the slider. I'd use it so much. But of course, it's not going to be that. It's going to be another boring brick and whatever. Yeah. But I just want to see what they do with the cameras.
That's what I'm most apprehensive about. Is for me, the V series has always meant survivability. It was bringing sort of like almost Galaxy Active specs, which we haven't heard any word. Those are always my favorite Samsung phones. Yeah. That an S8 Active, I would be very curious to see what Samsung would do there, because I don't know that you can make a rugged phone with that much of a curve to the display.
I want my S8 Zoom.
Oh, poor Tony. That's never going to happen. So wait. So I'm most apprehensive about the V30 if they introduce a slider, because I feel like that's going to complicate the hardware enough to reduce the certifications on water and drop resistance. But for me, the phone I'm kind of most curious to see how they might follow it up is Huawei with the next Mate. Again, the Mate 9 completely took me by surprise last year in how much I ended up using that phone. They're due a processor refresh, and the Kirin, I don't think, gets enough conversation here in the States, where it was well ahead of the Qualcomm curve. If you bought the Mate in Europe at launch, you were a good 6 months ahead of Qualcomm 835 performance. Yeah. So I'm really curious to see what they can do, because I think they keep finding these spikes of interest, and then they sort of settle into a lull, and then Honor sort of takes away some of the conversation from the P series. And I don't know that they've really nailed down their strategy for what phone is supposed to occupy which niche, but the Mate has sort of consistently delivered what it promises it can do. And so I'd be curious to see if they can keep that consistency going with that line.
The most interesting promise I think they made that I would like to see if it's delivered is that born fast, remain fast thing, where they did those optimizations supposedly to the kernel and to the software to make sure it doesn't bog down over time. And I think that's like, I'd like to see one in 2 years and see how it's running. There's one that's been consistently used for 2 years.
I can say the launch device I got 9 months ago is faring very well. Again, this is a phone that I use almost every day. Mostly, again, which is kind of silly, is it's sort of my gaming platform. It's the phone that was running Marvel Future Fight the best. So I've got it currently right here, grinding missions in the background as we're doing this podcast, so I don't have to do all the grindy stuff. But I don't know how techie how real, like what real technology is actually working back there.
Yeah.
But it does seem to be doing something better than some of the experiences like I've had with a 1-year-old Galaxy. My wife's F7 is a mess and has been for a while, but she kind of refuses to wipe it out because it's a pain to move files around and back up photos that weren't up on Google Photos and all that. I don't foresee the same kinds of issues with my Mate. But again, I can't speak to whether or not that's the placebo effect. Like they said, they're doing better garbage collection, and maybe it's just some software patch to dump the cache every week or something like that. But I have been impressed so far. So we'll see if that continues. Guys, I want to spend a little time sort of just taking a quick look back, since I have you all in the same hangout here. And I know we're already running a little long on this podcast, but I kind of feel like this is the appropriate conversation to jump into. Since this is the 5th anniversary of the Weekly, episode 260, 5 years of podcast production.
It's so crazy.
Jules has a little audio clip here too, which is kind of crazy, because I don't think many in our current audience will remember that there was a podcast before the Pocketnow Weekly called the Pocketcast.
Yes.
And he wants to play a little bit of it so that you guys can hear just, where we've come from.
How terrible we were,
Hey
yes.
guys, and welcome to the first ever Pocketnow podcast. We're calling this the Pocketcast. We've never done a podcast before, even though we've gotten a lot of requests for them over the years. We wanted to do a podcast in a little bit of a different way than what you see out there. So the format this will take is sort of a raw, unedited conversation between two smartphone geeks. And it will vary from week to week, probably in the form of one Pocketnow editor to another Pocketnow editor. This week, we're going to start out with Evan Blass. He's the managing editor now. And Evan, say hi.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Is that just a long stretch of dead air? Or is that the end of the clip?
That was, just for reference, it was January 30th, 2011.
That's
Wow.
hilarious, because I, as someone who is absolutely terrible at introducing people and wrapping up podcasts, I know that pain so well. Of so this guest is on. Say hello, guest.
This format, and I have some appreciation for what Michael, you do, and Juan, when you lead these shows. It's very difficult to get the cadence right, to get the feel right, and it gives you a real appreciation for like interviewers, like the people you see on TV, like Charlie Rose, or like even the late night guys, and how good they are at asking the right questions, waiting the right amount of time. It's very nuanced, very difficult.
I think for me, because all of us have at one point hosted at least one podcast, half of the success of a good host is the co-host, and it all comes down to the chemistry those people have and the thoughts they're just throwing at each other. And if that manages or turns out to be a natural conversation, just like chemistry, then that's the recipe for success.
Yeah, I completely agree. That is like the one crucial component that has to be there. If that's there, you can stumble on other stuff. You can deal with dumb technical crap that pops up every freaking week because you use Google Hangouts. But like, if the core chemistry of the host is there, it's that can be a magical thing.
Nah, I love you, Jules. You've been keeping me from completely nuking my PC because of all of the crap we've been going through on Google Hangouts. So I kind of wanted to get sort of a look back, a little reminiscing, if you will. When you guys moved from the Pocketcast to the Pocketnow Weekly, how did that come about?
Let me start and let Michael finish. Because in between the Pocketcast and the Pocketnow Weekly reboot, which was, I've got notes, on July 12th, 2012,
Wow.
Pocketnow has hired Michael Fisher. I got an email from Brandon, or maybe it was the other way around, that, hey, there's this guy here who sent in a resume who would like to work for us. So long story short, we hired him, and Michael and I were talking about the podcast. And I told him that we failed miserably at our first iteration, and he said he would love to reboot the podcast, to bring it in a new format with a new paradigm. And I told him that I care so little about the podcast that if he wants to handle it from A to Z, he can do whatever he wants with it. I just don't want to hear about it anymore. And here's where Michael comes in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I got an email. I remember I was on a train and I got an email from Tony in typical Anton fashion, which was out of the blue. I didn't know it was coming. We had talked about the podcast weeks before, and he says, "Okay, this is what will happen. We will do a podcast. You will host it. It will be called the Pocketnow Weekly. We will have the first episode soon." I was like, "No, fantastic! I can't believe. Oh my god!" And
Those are always beautiful emails. I love those communications.
They're right to the point. There's no fluff at all. It just and it was, we figured out a platform. We got things together. Brandon had rather copious notes, I think, with regard to like format and suggestions, which were very helpful because if it were me, I would just be rapping back and forth. If Brandon wanted to do a segment, I guess I'll let you talk about your particular segments, Brandon. But I was just so happy to kind of spearhead this initiative because for me, listening to tech people talk about podcasts, listening to talk on a podcast, listening to phone nerds geek out and be free outside the confines of a written format or a video format, just rapping a little bit. I mean, that's what hooked me. I would listen to podcasts for years before I even got into this business. And so it was very exciting to actually start one, even if Brandon made me do stuff that I hated.
Well, and what kind of stuff was that, Brandon?
Well, so we have this, we would get so frustrated about certain things in the smartphone world, like HTC making a camera with 4 megapixels and saying that it was okay. Megapixels don't matter. And yet 4 megapixels is not even enough resolution to really zoom in at all, let alone look at the picture on a iPad Retina display. It's just not full resolution. And so we would like do these things where we pretend we're HTC executives in like a boardroom or something, and we'd have this like asinine conversation about like how we're going to screw over people that want megapixels because megapixels don't matter. And everybody loved this role playing so much that we
we actually did it in this format of the three of us, Michael, Brandon, and myself, for almost a season, until I received a email from Michael, which sounded just like the email I sent him, where in the interim, Brandon has left Pocketnow. I took over as editor-in-chief, and Michael informed me that as of, I don't know, the next episode, we're going to go live with video.
Oh,
and I said, absolutely not. And he said, it's my baby. We're doing it.
That's right. Right. That was the 100th episode when we did that switch over.
Well, and actually, I think
Jules, that was before Hangouts was HD.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's still like 720p. But Jules, I think you've got a clip from episode 101 talking about that transition.
Oh, God. I'm your host, Michael Fisher, editorial director of Pocketnow from Boston, Massachusetts. Your first officer today, hailing from the one and only Super Carolina, is senior editor Taylor Martin. Hey, man.
What's up? I have to say, before we go any further, I'm not sure I like this video podcast because it means that I have to pay attention. I have to be present and hear and look at the screen.
No, don't worry. You don't have to do that because right now you're hidden behind my intro script, which everyone can see I'm reading, which is another reason I don't like videos. So I'm with you, but we'll talk about that in a second. We also have other people on the air, and the music's running out, even though you can't hear it right now. Chief News Editor Stephen Shank from New Jersey, the Pocketnow News Desk head. Hey, man, welcome aboard.
Hey. I too share Taylor's frustrations. I like to spend the weekly basically staring out my window watching chipmunks play, and you've taken that away from me.
Yeah, I spend most of the audio weekly. The last 100 episodes kind of like, yeah.
Especially when I'm talking, right?
Yeah, especially when Taylor's talking, yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, that was a rocky transition, wasn't it? You could hear the distortion because we had like 10 episodes of technical problems. It's a wonder anyone came with us for those 2 months where we were struggling with stuff.
Well, and you guys managed to land. Our viewers have heard me complain about this so much. You guys managed to at least land a system because when I came on, it was a pretty well-oiled machine, and it seemed like a couple months after I joined, that Google changed something almost every week on us after that point, which was throwing a new wrench in the gears here, or breaking something that we used to count on there, to the point where we've gone pre-recorded for the last couple months. This is the first time we wanted to have everything in place so that we could bring you guys back on live. So this is the first live broadcast we've done in months, cool. Just to sort out all of the ridiculous problems that we've been facing, but not to again bore our audience with my technical issues. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that the Pocketnow Weekly, under this tutelage, was also an award-winning podcast that the Stitcher Awards back in the day actually did feature. And look at that!
I have it right here with me. This 2013 Stitcher Awards best.
I'm not even sure why that isn't at the company headquarters.
I know. I for a second I thought about it, because I'm getting it off the shelf in there, and I'm like, I bet you Tony's going to tell me to send that to him.
Sitting right next there to my golden YouTube button.
That mobile Nathan jerk over there.
I decided when I was sending one of my many boxes to Tony, I was like, I'm going to keep this and see if he notices.
Keep it, man. Keep it, man. It's all of our work, but it's mostly your baby. So.
Well, thank you.
Well, and Jules, also in keeping the memory train rolling, I think you also have something for the Stitcher Awards too, right, Jules?
Alongside great podcasts like Twits, This Week in Tech, The Vergecast, and How Stuff Works Tech Stuff, we won. We won Best Tech Podcast of 2013, and it is all thanks to you. Thank you, everyone. Can we have a round of applause, gentlemen? An old-fashioned one? Yes, isn't that lovely? This is for you, listeners, not for us. We really do appreciate it. We were. When was it? The same day we did the podcast last week? It was. We had Ryan Negrian last week, and then like that night, the award ceremony happened, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I wish I could have announced it last week. This is like week-old news at this point. Yeah. But it's great stuff. We made a post about it, so we just wanted to say on the air here, thank you to everyone who voted for us. And I promise, as soon as our trophy comes in, I will put it on Instagram. I can see.
I think this fire truck was here for a cat nut tree or something.
Thank you, Taylor. Yeah,
I have no idea what Taylor's talking about.
There's probably some sirens he thought we could hear, but we couldn't. But yeah, that was quite a surprise. I remember talking to the Stitcher folks who at that time were in San Francisco. They probably still are. And I was like, they were like, "Will you come to our awards dinner?" I'm like, I don't know if I can fly out to San Francisco just for the awards. Hey, Tony, can we? Tony's like, no. I'm like, yeah, that's fair. And the people replied from Stitcher, and they were like, we really think you should come out. It would be worth it to you. And I'm like, Tony, I don't know if this means we're going to win, but yeah. So it was great. I like that it was based on audience voting. That felt really nice. It felt like we achieved something.
Good times.
Yeah.
Good times. No, I certainly think something definitely has been achieved. I got to say, it's been my privilege. It's been my honor to kind of continue these discussions and hopefully return these discussions to the real-time discussion that you guys started years and years ago. I get to say that because it is 5 years ago that all of this is that this was put up. And to hear the intro, I feel, from that very first episode, talking about the history that Pocketnow had before the podcast, that this is a story that was a decade in the making as the internet evolved to produce this kind of streaming media. Brandon, just to kind of take it back to you, in looking at where all of this stuff has gone, the popularity of podcasts today, a stand-up comedian can like draw in millions of listeners in a way that even radio can't touch now in reaching out to a specific audience. I mean, you guys were on the bleeding edge of that. You guys were well ahead of the curve for people producing their own content like that. It's got to be really exciting to see where this media monster has gone since then, democratizing the ability to share a story with your audience and to know that you were a part of helping to produce that.
You're talking about podcasting or videos?
Podcasting. Video streaming is definitely something that's kind of fun, but as someone who lives in Southern California, for me to drive around and not want to, road rage at every person who cuts me off in traffic, it's been podcasting. I don't even use the satellite radio in my car. I don't listen to much music anymore. Unfortunately, my toddler daughter is just inundated with tech and politics as we're driving around. She's going to be very well informed.
I think we were actually a little later than we should have been. I mean, it was so many years of discussion and back and forth until Tony decided that it was just going to make it happen, and Michael was going to make it happen. And I think well before that we were talking about doing some sort of podcast, and that was around the time when we started to do video as well, which was new and totally different and weird, and really no one was doing it, and the quality was awful, and YouTube wasn't HD, and to upload a video would take forever. It's been cool. It's especially cool for the guys that aren't associated with big sites or don't have a lot of money, that they can fire up a camera or fire up a microphone for super cheap, and they can create and get distribution far beyond what could have been possible just not too long ago. And so my favorite part of that is that the quality, everybody's quality, keeps going up because of that, and that's just really nice to see.
Yeah, definitely. The the approachability of that is kind of incredible to have witnessed. I came into tech and discussion on message boards on ARPANET. And if you would ask me about like what the internet would have been, I could never in a million years have predicted that this is where we would have ended up, from sort of military hosted servers with message boards to the ability to have this real-time conversation with you guys, which I think is only fitting to maybe wrap up this discussion is what does the future hold for you fine gentlemen? Brandon, what are you working on? Where do you see this taking you? You're obviously still very passionate about technology and the consumer experience and relating that to people, telling that story to people.
Yeah. Well, for the last, I guess, almost 6 or 7 years, I've worked at XDA Developers. And, over there, we've been doing, the technical stuff and the enthusiast stuff. And one of the things we're always trying to figure out is sort of what happens after that. Because what used to be an enthusiast market is now a mass market. Everyone has a smartphone. And so that begs the question, like, what new cool things can we do with our phones? Like, we have access to all these apps, and, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, I use my Twitter client, it's my Facebook, I use Snapchat and Dialer and all that stuff, but there hasn't been anything new. And even if you create software from the very beginning and you create a custom ROM, innovation is also stagnated there. And so we're trying to figure out how we can do something a little different. And so that's kind of what I've been working on. But actually, I had a question for you guys. Ooh. That is somewhat related to this. Phones have come a really long way. In 2017, I think all of us have phones in our pocket that can take incredible pictures, better pictures than we would ever think possible, except for a DSLR. We've got batteries that last the entire day, morning till night, in almost every case. We've got screens so crisp and clear that we cannot see pixels, even I cannot see pixels. But what's the but, right? What is missing? Like, if you were to rewind 5 years ago and say in 2017 we would have all these phones, chicken butt. What's missing? What is leaving you to? What more do you want out of your phone? What's the missing piece?
Can I start?
Yes, please, Tony, jump in.
I'm not sure whether this answer is coming from me as a consumer, ultimately, because I am also a consumer, or it's coming from me being in this business for too long. I'm not saying I'm burnt out. I'm just saying that I've been doing this for so long. So my answer is, what's missing for me in a smartphone, and in this particular area is the feeling, the sentiment, the chicken bumps I got when I bought my first phone. I'm unboxing phones a lot less than you guys, and it's just another phone. I'm missing that sentiment when it meant something for me, when that was my phone and my phone alone, and I loved it. I think it's what I'm missing is that these pieces of tech, which are already in the hands of everybody, are not making me feel the way I felt back then. And I think that's, for me, it comes down to that.
That's good.
A lot of agreement there, Michael.
Nailed it. Yeah. Now, Tony, I don't think you and I have ever agreed as heartily on something. I'm completely with you. And some of it is because of the broadening and the commoditization of the smartphone as something that everyone has, and they're just bound to be less special over time. But for me, to sort of build on that idea, we had that special feeling, we had that customization. Not to be the Moto fanboy that you all know I am, but like in 2014 when Moto Maker came out and the Moto X was like, you can have a wood back, you can have a fabric back, you can have a leather back, you can have a plastic back, you can have it in any color, you can put your name on it, you can put your name on the splash screen, you can, all of that. I miss that so keenly, and it has not been recaptured by the Moto Z, which with its slap-on mods, because that feels like putting on a case. When you ordered the phone from the factory, made to your specifications, and every time you picked it up, it not only looked the way you wanted it to, but it felt, in my case with that leather back, it just felt like your phone. I mean, that was the height, the peak for me, and I would like to get back there somehow.
So I'm for mine, and I'm going to be really careful in how I try and express this idea, because it's an idea that I think is very easily misunderstood, not because of the audience, but because of my inability to articulate it and my inability to say the word inability. For me, because I agree with you guys, that feeling of something special, or that feeling of something new, when geek became chic, when geeks won, and these products became more consumer oriented, it's the same feeling I had back in the early days of me using Apple, that those companies start walking away from me, not that I'm suddenly less interested in their products, that these devices are less focused for me. I kind of hope that what comes next for phones will be the ability to use our phones less but more effectively. For us to start solving some of the social etiquette problems of using our phones, not just in the company of other human beings, but then also to help reduce the issues of problems with things like distracted driving. Coming back to
Sorry,
some of
what?
those,
I was texting. Can't hear you.
Yeah, exactly. Like all those gimmicks that we kind of have to do to still incorporate data. We're not going to put that genie back in its bottle where we're all just going to put our phones away and everyone's just going to be happy 1950s eating at a restaurant and only interacting with each other. But the company that will win the post-smartphone world is the company that can help us more organically transition into being data aware, but also socially aware and socially conscious. I don't feel it's going to be truly solved until we have self-driving cars. But to say that we can't address those problems along the way, I feel is reductive. I feel is an insult to the tech community. And there are so many amazing companies that are starting to work on this problem in earnest that I hope that's the next phase that we see. Our phones are crazy powerful. We're starting to dip our toe into augmented reality, better audio communication, better audio services. It would be nice if I could realize the vision of something like Bixby or IBM Watson or Google Assistant, where I could do even more of this without occupying all of my senses minus taste in operating this device. That I really hope is the next phase and what we will walk into. That will make me excited, really, truly excited to be talking about mobile technology again.
Have you seen the movie Her?
Yeah, I was just thinking.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, that's not even like that. Everybody having their own operating system that knows more about you than you know about yourself, because it has read every one of your emails, every one of your texts. It knows what's in every one of your pictures. It knows what your your spouse's favorite kind of ice cream is, when your anniversary is, and you just exist with this all-knowing thing, and it's entirely personalized for you. And every time Google says, we want to make a Google for everyone, that's what I think about. And that's what I hope we'll have with the robots, because the robots have to, clean our underpants.
You gotta have the robots.
But
like, I don't want to live in a future without robots. I'm with you there.
yeah, but I was going to say to answer, I guess, my own question, the but for me is that I still buy like all the phones because it's in my blood, and I get so excited. It always happens to me is that, there's the first 24 hours where I'm like, oh, this is cool. Oh, this phone has a 4K screen. Wow, I can watch 4K videos and the phone's battery life goes to 0 and my hand gets burnt. But then after that, I'm staring at a phone screen that has exactly the same icons in exactly the same place as the phone I had last year and the phone the year before that. And the way that I use my phone, with the exception of things like Google Photos, which lets me finally search all my photos with English, or like location-based services like Uber and all that stuff. I use my phone almost exactly the way I used to years ago. And the hardware's changing a little bit, and battery life's a little bit better, and they're faster and everything, but like it just feels there's too much sameness, and I don't know if it's just me. Do you guys feel that way?
No, it's
or?
not just you. Every time I set up a new phone and I put the social folder and the Google folder and my calendar widget all in the same spot, I'm like, there's probably a better way to do this. I'm just falling back into the habitual cycle of lock-in. And
taking that even further, I start getting paranoid and acting out if a particular icon or folder on my new phone is not exactly where I left it on the old phone, because I'm just browsing like crazy for it and I can't find it.
I had to reshoot for one of our recent comparison videos because my Chrome and Gmail icons were reversed on the bottom dock, and I couldn't let it go.
That's dedication.
Like, it was like it wouldn't have mattered to the audience. It was like this is killing me. I need to reshoot these. It was pretty rough. So no, I definitely feel that, because there's a part of it too where we face concerns that the general consumer doesn't. When they get a new phone, and maybe it's been a year, or maybe it's been 3 years, as we're seeing the industry trend towards holding onto our phones longer. Consumers out there are probably more willing to take risks than we are. We have to get through a review so efficiently now and with such high production value that if I can't operate the phone through muscle memory on day one, it takes me a lot longer to get into the vibe of what it is that I'm going to talk about with that phone. So again, my setup process, again, like you guys too, it's like, it's got to be exact. It's got to be the same. And I never really give things like edge sense a fair shake, because that doesn't change, that actually gets in the way of how I normally use a phone, just so I can get through like the camera review process or something.
Which is so funny, because
it's a fun exercise.
Go ahead, Ren.
Okay. I was going to say a fun exercise, and I recently did this. Third-party launchers let you save your setup and restore it to exactly how it looked before. A fun exercise is to think about exactly how you use your phone, and to say, okay, I use the Amazon app a lot, but it's on the second page. I wish I could put it on the first page, but I can't put it on the first page because that would make it look cluttered. What if I change the home screen grid? What if I made the icons a little bit smaller? What if I use some folders, or use some of Action Launcher or Nova Launchers, press and hold functionality, gestures? There's so much stuff you can do. And to sit there for like an hour one day and rethink how you use your phone and the stuff you want to access quickly, you can come out with a pretty compelling new home screen experience, and then you can carry that from phone to phone if you're just going to back up and restore your settings.
See, that's why you buy the BlackBerry Key 1. You just map an app to every button.
Yep.
And you're set.
Oh, it's so perfect. Actually, it was the BlackBerry Key 1 that helped me. So over the course of reviewing these products, I've gone from being that guy who had all 7 Galaxy home screens full of widgets and
oh my God.
shortcuts.
Oh God.
Wow.
To the BlackBerry Key 1 got me down to 2 home screens, and now that's the home screen setup that I'm going to be moving forward to.
Cool.
And my goal for next year is I want 1 home screen.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to. I push home and I don't want to have to swipe left or right. I want everything right there.
When Anton showed me his Android setup for the first time, it was on like a Nexus 7, and I was like, Tony, where's all your apps? It's just
That's all I have.
Just a blank wallpaper. I don't even think you had a clock widget on there. It was great.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
my goodness.
minimalistic like that.
I like it.
So I'm going to try and join you by next year, Tony. But Michael, so what does the future hold for not just for you, but I mean also for the kind of coverage that you're hoping to produce and kind of tech that you hope to see, and where do we go from here?
It's been fun.
Where do we go for the next 5 years of podcasts?
Yeah, right. Well, doing this and guesting on other podcasts has reminded me how much I missed actual podcasting. I'm really glad. I will forget to say this at the end of the show, so I'll just say it now. Like, I'm really glad that this show has gone on, in my absence, and thank you for your excellent stewardship, Juan and Jules and Tony and everybody, because it's really awesome that it's still here and you guys are still doing, in many ways, better work than I was doing, analytically at least. And like, I would like to do podcasting again. I would like to do other forms again, but I have to say, it has been really nice to just focus on video. Brandon, you were talking about getting an early start on video, and it seems like every week I get 3 or 4 emails from new aspiring YouTube tech vloggers who want to do this kind of thing. And now it's so crowded, it's unbelievably difficult, I feel, to break in. And the only people I've seen start in the past year and actually sort of start to make a name for themselves have done it really, really unconventionally. I don't want to drop any specifics, but there's some funny stuff out there. So I don't know. I've not ever been terribly good at predicting the future. I sort of like getting what's here now, evaluating it in the context of what has come before. But it has been an awful lot of fun to broaden into other aspects of mobility. I will tell you, it's a lot of fun to drive an electric car. That's something I never thought I would.
Really jealous of that test drive.
Oh my God.
Pretty epic.
Yeah, and also, we gave smartwatches a little bit of shade. I don't think the idea of a personal area network is totally dead. I think that we will. Right now, I think every day I wear 3 different pieces of tech. I've got a smartwatch, usually a fitness band, and my public transit pass ring. And I think that will be light going forward. I think we're going to start seeing more of the smart shoes stuff and probably a smart belt, if any of the Kickstarter project, you know what I mean? Like, I think that the smartphone will continue to be the hub, but we will have increasingly specialized accessories until, we are Borg.
Yeah. I really hope we don't have Bluetooth belts, because can you imagine saying, "Oh, geez, I forgot to charge my belt"? Like, what the hell?
I know. I want it. I want it. Bring it. Now, there was a Kickstarter that didn't go through. That was just a compass belt.
Oh,
and
really?
all it did was give you a little light pulse where north was. And I just like, the idea of geolocation and always being aware of cardinal directions. Like, that's kind of cool. I want that.
I guess
and
so.
There's so much potential there. There's so much room.
Yeah. I think I always know what direction I'm facing. I'm very magnetic.
It's a little tricky in the valley. Like, you start getting into some of those neighborhoods, and like Google Maps says, like, in so many miles, go east, and you're like, what landmark is supposed to point me towards east on a road that runs diagonal?
Just don't get too far from the ocean. That's the answer. Just live close to the ocean entirely.
And Tony, I mean, we kind of plugged the future of Pocketnow, especially sort of broadening out to other to another language. Pocketnow Spanish, but what do you see? I'm hoping a part of that answer is keeping me employed. So.
Let me start off with the general. I think that we are heading towards an era where, as much as I fight it, and as much as a lot of people fight it out there, our lives will be completely connected, from your home to your appliances to your car to your everything. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. What I can do is that I'm going to probably be the last person who will be driving a car which actually makes noise. When you will probably all be floating or driving electrics, I'm going to rev my flat 6 9,000 RPMs. But no, seriously, this is where we're
like the one smoker in the non-smoking restaurant.
Yes, and you'll pay for that. This is where we're headed at, and all of the efforts the companies are putting into their products and services are pointing in that direction. Now, correlating that with all the things which are happening around the world, with people doing bad things to other people and other people controlling all of the other people to save other people, I think that that's also inevitable. And at one point, we'll have to learn to deal with it and live with it, whether we like it or not. So that's the future I'm seeing for the industry. As far as Pocketnow is concerned, I think I took a couple of steps back from creating content when I took over from Brandon as the editor-in-chief, because I've got so many things to handle that it left me no time for creating content. I occasionally jump in when help is needed, but I prefer staying in the background and trying to create the conditions for you guys, whether it was for you, Michael, back in the past, or it's for you, Juan, or for Jaime, to shine, to speak, to talk, to educate. I'm the kind of person who creates the right setup for you guys to do your jobs. And I think that I'm good at that, and that's where I see myself, and that's what I see myself doing in the future. And yes, you'll still be employed, Juan.
Oh, excellent. Good. I was like, and?
You were waiting for that, yeah.
And Jules just piped in our chat, Asimov Dinesh. I like that. I like Asimov. That's good.
Yeah. I like when Jules says funny stuff. He just pops up. It's so funny. Nobody knows.
It's just for us. See, that's why you always need everyone should have a Jules co-pilot. Amen. Keeping the show running like that. But folks, there you have it. The 5th year anniversary of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. This show is over. But the conversation continues on Twitter, where Brandon is at Brandon Miniman, Michael is at the Mr. Mobile, Tony is Anton Dinaj, Jules is at Point Jules, and I'm humbly at Some Gadget Guy. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. We're basically everywhere. And shows like this cannot exist without your support. Me taking just a brief moment to say a huge thank you for the audience that has supported this show prior to me, and then with me, and then also through some of our teething pains in trying to get this back up and running, especially for the live broadcast. We wanted to make sure everything was working as seamlessly as we could for this anniversary show. But since the show can't exist without your support, sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology and dropping reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever podcast reviews can be left. And once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor, HelloFresh. They're helping us keep the lights on and our stomachs full, but ultimately there wouldn't be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness. So make sure you tune back we really wanted to use what we learned in school, so we moved out to LA to work in the entertainment industry. And I started at a talent agency, a voiceover talent agency, and then moved over into casting. So I've been a voiceover casting director for the last 4 or 5 years.
Which leads me to like a critical question, Juan. Why did I not know you 5 years ago? I don't understand.
We've been talking online for a